Welcome to the Banega Swasth India podcast. Our focus is on creating a holistic and healthy India for each and every one. Our goal is One World Hygiene, where citizens, individuals, society and governments work together to ensure health for all and foster global unity for a healthier tomorrow. The increasing demands on water resources by India's population and diminishing quality of existing water resources have led to a situation where the consumption of water is rapidly increasing, while the supply remains less constant for agricultural purposes, further affecting food security. To know more about how India can move towards becoming water positive and make agriculture sustainable, we on Banega Swasth India podcast spoke to Ulac Demirag, India Country Director and Representative, International Fund for Agricultural Development. Thank you, Mr. Demirag, for joining us. Could you tell us how climate change is making agriculture unsustainable?
When you look at climate change, we are thinking of the macroclimate. We are thinking of the big climate change, the global warming. But in fact, this translates to mesoclimates and microclimates. And the microclimate is basically the climate that is influenced directly by the vegetation cover. Now, if inadequate use of agricultural resources basically removes the vegetation cover and we are going to monocropping, we are severely transforming the microclimatic conditions that the farmers are producing with, and of course also the soil conditions. Another factor is that we are seeing that a lot of carbon is reduced from the soil because simply we don't rely anymore on the traditional and the geoecological processes for renovation of the carbon soil. So this leads, of course, to also a reduction of the retention capacity for water in the soils and has very detrimental effects, especially with these high variations of weather conditions that we are seeing with climate change.
So this brings me to my next question. How can we move from conventional to sustainable agricultural practices?
Currently, Indian agriculture is very diverse, right? We have a very wide range of agricultural production systems, but let's say the largest part of the Indian production of rice, wheat, of these major commodities that are also feeding in the public distribution system is based on a very, let's say, conservative way of doing agriculture, very technology driven and very strong input driven. Now, this is, of course, has its toll on the environment, and we have to move towards more sustainable agricultural practices. And, of course, at the same time, we have to bring the smallholders more into the production system. So a lot of approaches for this are existing. For instance, promotion of agroecology approaches. IFAD has a project that is specifically focusing on agroecology and making agroecology value chains more sustainable and making them viable so that they can link up to markets that have a demand for agroecologically produced commodities or agricultural products, nutrition.
Mr. Demirag, what other factors are taken into consideration when we talk about adapting sustainable agricultural practices?
Another aspect to this is, of course, the diversification of crop choices, right? In certain states, for instance, Odisha, where IFAD is also working, the government is shifting a lot of the main commodities that are part of the government programs towards millets. And millets, in India, we are talking about a revival of millets. Millets are not new. They have been just forgotten because they were the traditional foods. And they are coincidentally very nutritious. They are very well adapted to climate change, and they deliver to those who grow them a much more resilient production basis because they need far less water and they are far more tolerant to weather variations than are the other crops that have been replacing them in the past.
Banega Swasth India podcast will be back after a short break.
Watch out for our new Banega Swasth India video podcast, Swasthya Mantra, the first ever public health and hygiene podcast. The podcast is live on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube in English and in Hindi.
Welcome back to Banega Swasth India podcast. Mr. Demirag, how can we sustainably manage the water resources for agriculture and make it accessible for more households?
You know, water is key to agriculture, and most farmers worldwide have one or the other problem with water. Either they have too much water or too little or too erratic, with long dry spells. So irrigation is being seen as, part of the solution, of course. But irrigation can only work when, you have crops or a production that is also viable, that can finance irrigation, because irrigation comes with a cost. We have to recognize that water has a cost. Currently, its cost is mainly to society, because there are no regulations that incentivize very, very cautious use of water, right? So farmers can save a lot of money digging very simple irrigation systems, and then basically flooding their fields. A lot of water is going to waste this way, or is running off very, very quickly, instead of thinking of a much more judicious use and a much more judicious engagement with this very rare commodity. What I think has to happen is that we invest and provide incentives for investment into water-saving technologies. For instance, all these flood and gravity-based irrigation systems can be easily transformed into pressurized irrigation systems with sprinkler, with drip irrigation, where we can much better regulate the amount of water and really adjust it to the actual needs of the crop. So this way we could enlarge our irrigation systems, use the water for many, many more households and enterprises to use them, and at the same time do a very, very major contribution for climate change.
Well, thank you. You've given us a great insight on how we can shift towards better irrigation practices. Could you also shed some light on how can we make agriculture more water positive in India?
There are a number of ways to make agriculture more water positive. First of all, we have to really think of the crops that we are growing. Well, like there are crops that draw a lot of water from the soil, and we have to be aware that this is part of the assets that go into the production. So water-saving crops like pulses, like millets, are the way to go in the long run in water deficit areas. At the same time, however, I've already mentioned briefly the microclimatic conditions, and we can do a lot to create a much better microclimate on farms by putting a shade cover, by combining trees with smaller crops, crop combinations that are coming closer to an agroforestry system, and that is much closer to the natural conditions. Another set of conditions, for instance, or technologies, and I'm talking now about one of the driest areas in the world, Australia, where also 99% of the farming is rain-fed. How do they do it? They have shifted long time ago to conservation agriculture. So they have abundant tillage or minimized tillage, because leaving the soils in their natural geoecological condition gives these soils a much better water retention capacity than when we plow them every year. So there are many technologies like this that can be combined and that can have very, very good effects on rain-fed agriculture, make it much more resilient and adapted to climate change, but also save the water for other uses that humans may have.
Thank you, Mr. Demirag, for joining us today. That's it on the Banega Swasth India podcast this week. If you have comments, queries, or suggestions on the topic we discussed today, or issues you would like us to cover in future, do write to us on bsipodcast@ndtv.com. Remember, BSI stands for Banega Swasth India. You can also connect with us on Banega Swasth India handles on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and continue the conversation through the week. Till next week, this is Ambika Singh Kama signing off. Stay healthy and stay safe.